What's up, T-Rex fans? This is my second video on the T-Rex. The first one I kind of explained on the initial issues that I was having with it. The three big ones were the gas cap, which I explained in video 1, which has now been fixed. The throttle cable, which had too many zip ties on it, so it was sticking, and I'm going to give you an update on that. And then the third thing was the steering, which even though this thing was steering straight, the steering wheel was kicked to the left a couple inches. All that stuff is now fixed. There has been another issue, which I'm going to get into here in a minute. But overall, this thing is finally 100% sorted. And man, it was 82 degrees yesterday. And I really had a good time taking it out when everything was perfect on it. And even got into a couple little scuffles out on the street with it, which I'll talk about here in a minute. I do not have performance stats yet. I went out with my draggy to do them the other day, and it was like a 40-mile-an-hour crosswind, so I have to really just wait for the better weather to get up here to Northern Illinois so everything is safe and sound and I don't risk my life doing it. So anyways, let's get back into it here. Number one, I'm going to start with the throttle cable. So initially, like I said in video 1, it was sticking. They put too many zip ties on it. Campagna was really good. They sent a new throttle cable in as fast as they could. They installed the new one. However, when I got it back, it was a vast improvement, but I was still noticing some sticking issues. So I took it to my mechanic, who is Hans at Dean's Performance. He's a very famous mechanic in actually the United States, not just a local area. If you guys watch Street Outlaws, the car that he's the mechanic on is Boost 12, the Mustang. Anyways, he's just one of the best mechanics. He's worked on so many of my vehicles over the years, my Vets, my Mustangs, all kinds of, and he even worked on my old Campagna T-Rex with the BMW engine in it. Anyways, I said, let me come out there, Hans, please take a look at this thing. And he did, and he found a couple of issues that they did wrong. And I'm not blaming the dealer because, maybe they don't know what to do because there isn't even a maintenance manual out for this thing yet because it's so new. So I'm going to get into it. So the big issues were, number one, the throttle cable, which is under the steering wheel here by the pedals. If you look behind it, you see that circle between the two pedals? That's the stopper. I'm going to get back into that here in a second. But the big thing was the cable was not adjusted properly, and I had way too much play in the pedal. There was like 3 inches of pedal before the throttle would get going. So it was just really sloppy and loose. So he ended up tightening that up, and you actually tighten it from the bottom of the cable. If you look down at the bottom, the nut that's on the bottom of that cable is how you adjust that. The stopper, the point of the stopper is to give you full throttle and not let you go past it. Well, guess what? Mine was adjusted too far out, and I was only getting about 80% throttle and didn't even know. So if you look in there, back there, yep, there's the other side of it on the engine where the throttle cable comes into. So it goes from the pedal through this area, up through the firewall back here, I guess you'd call it a firewall, and back into here. So the other thing they did wrong was, if you look in there, you could see where it pops in, the little circle right there. They adjusted the cable and spun it, and it got wound up. So when he loosened the nut over there on that side, it spun back around. So what you have to do if you adjust that is disconnect it back in here, adjust it up there so the cable will spin freely and doesn't get wrapped up and wound, and then voila, everything is perfect. So mine is excellent now. I have full throttle capabilities, which, let me explain something to everybody, is insane, because I already thought this thing was fast, and then I took it out after he fixed it yesterday, and man, oh man, oh man, it was like somebody put nitrous on this thing. It's so much faster because I was literally missing 20% of my throttle. So that's all done. Okay, so that's fixed. Now I want to talk about the maintenance that I've done on this thing. I already did my first service. I got almost 600 miles now. So the maintenance I did was I did the oil change, and I'm going to show you guys that in a minute. We also adjusted the chain. So how do you adjust the chain? The adjustment bolts are right here, okay, for the chain. But when you do the chain, you have to loosen up the axle nut, which is on this side, and you can see that's the axle nut right there, okay? And then this side, it looks like there's an adjustment too. Guess what that side does? That side does your steering. So if your steering wheel is slightly off, this is the side that you adjust to get the steering right. But when you adjust the chain, it's the other side, and you do mess with this side slightly, and I can get into that if anybody has questions, just comment. But no matter what, you always have to loosen the axle nut, which is no big deal, and then put a new cotter pin in each and every time. You can see that I've made quite a few adjustments already because my nut's a little bit worn, just because I wanted to get my steering straight, which is now is perfectly straight. Okay, so that's the chain. The oil change is pretty simple. I'm gonna set my phone down just to kind of show you guys. I gotta get the bag off, so I'm gonna set the phone here for 1 second. All right, sorry about that. I got the bag off. So let's look back here. It's real simple. Once you get the bag off, the oil filter is right there. Can you see it? K&N right there. And then the bolt to do the oil is right in front of it. This bolt right here. Okay, so that's how you drain the oil. And then the filter is right there. It's super easy. Okay, so that's that. The other thing I want to talk about, I said that I had another issue. I was parking this thing and getting a little drop of something under it, under the exhaust right about here. Okay, right under this section of the exhaust. And I touched it and it smelled like gear oil, which confused me because this thing, the transmission and the transmission and the engine are bathed in the same oil. So I was like, why do I smell gear oil, which is a very distinct smell? And that's because the reverse gear on this thing, mechanical reverse gear that Campagna installs to give it a reverse, actually was leaking. Now, this is, I guess, kind of a common issue, so people need to be aware of it. So where was it leaking from? So there's a bolt right there. You see it right there with the red on top. Mine has a special kind of seal on it now. That's where it would leak from. That bolt has to be adjusted a very specific way because on the bottom of it's a little ball, and when you put it into reverse, it either makes reverse going in easy or hard. So that bolt has to be in there at a specific distance, blah, blah, blah. So I guess from the factory, they were putting some weird sealant on there. Some of them were just dripping out slightly. Mine was. It's now fixed. So obviously I'm happy about that. So everybody, if you buy one of these things, you should definitely check that out. So that's that's the other issue that I had with this thing. All right, so the other issue that I talked about in the first video that I didn't get into is the bags. So here's my issue with the bags. And it's just kind of something stupid and little, but I'm gonna show you guys. So you turn the bag to open it, bang, that unlocks it. Now, here's the thing. These are motorcycle bags made by Givy. So on a motorcycle, this would need to extend all the way down. Okay, but because there's ground clearance issues, it doesn't. So what Campagna did was they just tied this off. You can see that if this thing was fully extended, you know, then it would go all the way down, but it can't. I really feel like they should have put something right here where, you know, it just was one length and wasn't tied like that, because when you go to shut the bag, look what happens. It gets stuck. So you got to just kind of stick your hand right there on both sides and make sure it's in when you shut the bag. And I can't remember on my old one if that was like that or not, or if they had the right size length on that. So that's one of the other issues on this thing. All right, here's a video of the startup too, and I wanted to show you guys all the options on the Kawasaki dashboard. All right, as you can see, it's got the temperature, and if you hit the button up over here, it goes through the menu. So current mile per gallon, average, which is pretty bad, but I've been kind of hard on this thing so far. Range, and that normally works, but I'm not moving, so it's not picking up. Battery voltage, outside temperature. Okay, very good. Then on the bottom button here is what controls your odometer. So you hit that, you can see the range. It has two different options, trip A and trip B. And then your total miles. I almost got 600 on this. This big button on the bottom controls your traction control and all that. So when you hit it, it's got the power mode. You see it blinking right there. I have it in full. And then the traction control, kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can get better in here. can see that blinking. I have it off, the traction control. You just hit the button again. Power mode, first one. And then you could use the toggles over here to go up and down on the arrows to switch it. And then the other button does the traction control. Other than that, it's just a nice setup. And it looks pretty good. One last thing that I did since doing my last video was I upgraded the windshield. I put a full windshield on this thing, which has been a massive improvement, as you can see. It makes a big difference, especially in the cooler weather. So I highly recommend that. Really easy to install. So that's been a nice upgrade that I did on it since the last video. So in conclusion, what I would say is I'm really happy with this thing so far. It's had its quirks. Again, it's low production, so you're gonna be dealing with little things like that. But now that it's been sorted, as long as it stays sorted, I think I'm gonna really enjoy this thing this summer. It's just been a lot of fun. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, I did get into a little scuffle with this thing, which kind of gives me a real gauge of how fast it is. So a couple nights ago when it was real warm out, I went out when the sun was going down, a little sunset cruise action. And I ran into a couple motorcycles on a 3-lane road. One was a 750 and one was a Yamaha R1. Got stuck at the light with them, took off, and I was ahead of the R1 all the way up to about 110 miles an hour. Finally, he went past me. He wasn't pulling on me really hard. He was probably, a bus length or two ahead of me by 130, and he was still steadily pulling. The guy in the 750 though, me and him were pretty dead even. All the way up to 130 before I let off, just because this thing, I don't know if it's electronically limited to 130, but I feel like right around there, something's going on with the ECU that I'm gonna investigate and find out about, because I do plan on getting this thing tuned. But I'm gonna do the draggy stats before I tune it, and then I'll do the draggy stats after I tune it as well to see what kind of gains I get. So that was an interesting race, because if this thing's keeping up with a 750, especially from a roll, it should be in the 10s, maybe low 11s, which is really fast compared to the old one. So again, I wanted to give you guys an update on that. But overall, very impressed with it. I'm impressed with the Campagna customer service so far. Again, it's had small quirks, but they've all been worked out so far, and everything's working out so far so good. Any questions, comment below. I will do another video once I get my performance stats.